Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Aning Bojo. Uh, I'd like to say welcome to the territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I'm not a territorial person here, but my territory is far away. And as an indigenous person, I'm also here to say welcome. That yes, that I'm here as well as I'm not a settler. I'm a resident of Turtle Island and always have been. That enough, I think. Thanks.
Thank you, Veronica. Yeah, so I'm Max Gross. I'm a proud Strathcona resident. I live here in Strathcona, and I'm also one of Veronica's assistant firekeeper in training. So I've been helping out as a volunteer at Tent City. And yeah, both worlds are very important to me. So like many of you, I'm interested in connecting, not dividing these two worlds, working towards solutions we can all agree upon. For hundreds of people, a tent in Strathcona Park is the only home they have right now. And many housed Strathcona residents are very angry about this situation, what's happening to their park, and they feel threatened by this community. Busting up the camp for a third time since spring with no alternative housing offers on the heels of the worst fatal overdose season in provincial history and the COVID pandemic, just to see a move to McLean Park or Woodland Park, wherever it may be, is no solution for anybody. So here we are. The house-oriented and street-oriented populations in our neighborhood are both too substantial and historically well established to be wished away by the other. And if connected, too substantial to be ignored by government. We must work together. If we, the actual people facing these issues directly here in Strathcona, can't work together to find shared and focused solutions to the issues at hand, how can we expect elected officials who don't live here to create satisfactory, long-lasting solutions for us? Until we find solutions, Camp KT leaders like Veronica and the residents of Camp KT find acceptable and demand that they be implemented on their behalf, the issues in these streets and these parks are just going to keep happening. If we can connect both sides of Prior Street and get focused on specific, reasonable demands we all find satisfactory, governments will have no choice but to start listening. We are stronger together. I hope that this evening is a step towards togetherness, and I'm now honored to introduce Veronica again to say a few words. Thank you, folks.
I am a guest here on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, and thanks to those First Nations for allowing me to reside here. Thank you. I've been coming to this park for many years. I used to garden here, and I know the plants, the animals, and the birds that live here in this park. I remember when the garden was created, and I was a part of this community for many years. I know the gardens well. We are grateful to the gardeners who have welcomed our community at the park and have given us flowers, vegetables, lemon balm for tea, a place to put our compost, and access to water and hoses, and who talk and meet with our residents at the camp. When we came to this place, we saw right away that there is a tree with an eagle in it. We felt really blessed that there is an eagle at the camp. We made a fence with a rope around the eagle tree and put tobacco ties all around it and made sure that nobody puts their tents under the tree or disturbs the eagles. We also made tobacco ties and put them all around the camp, in the trees, and at every end of the camp. One day I saw the baby eagles, and I called to the firekeepers and residents and volunteers to show them the babies flying in the sky. Sometimes we see crows, ravens, and other birds flying around with the eagles and chasing each other's. We bring groups for drumming and singing at the sacred fire almost every night, and sometimes we are lucky enough to also have drummers and the big drum, a very important cultural tradition. The eagles like to hear the drumming, and they sometimes come around when they hear it. The sacred fire is the only sacred fire for miles around. People come here for spiritual support, guidance, and healing, and for its healing energy to do their work. We've held a pipe ceremony here and a special fire for a passing of a loved one. There are lots of animals that live in this park: skunks, coyotes, squirrels, and others. I've seen generations of skunks that live here and have babies. I tell the residents at the camp to watch out for and to have respect for the skunks and the baby squirrels and all the animals who live here. Every evening for the past month, the geese fly low overhead, over the park and the sacred fire, so close that we can see their feathers. I do love this park. In September, we'll be helping to host the salmon caravan. A piece of land near the track will be given over to make a traditional Indian genius garden. In mid September, the back of the small hill will be plowed and the garden area will be expanding with more cedars and indigenous plants. The tents there will be relocated and the area will be roped off like the eco tree with tobacco ties. The site already has small indigenous trees, and there are indigenous plants near the eagle tree and throughout the park. Artists and traditional food security activist Don Morrison and C. Weiss, who is an artist, botanist, and educator, will guide a team to take up the soil and work with volunteers and residents to plant the area with traditional plants typical for the area. On September 19th, there will be an event in the park for the Salmon Caravan with a webinar including me, Veronica, as a speaker and a march and caravan to Falls Creek. This park is really special to me, and I'd like to thank you for caring about this park and this community as much as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So now I would like to introduce Ryan Suds, who's helping out here. He's also the filmmaker of the film we're going to watch tonight. So Ryan Suds is a documentary and actuality filmmaker here in Vancouver, and he's going to introduce his work.
Hi, everyone. And yeah, thank you for joining us this evening. I guess just to introduce the film, I've been working down in the park since June, working with the camp leadership on this video project. The goal was to follow some of the day-to-day activities of the camp, to meet some of the people who live there and who are volunteering there, and I guess learn about some of the issues that are affecting those folks, but then also learning about the issues that affect the camp on a day-to-day basis, both the things that are happening ongoing, but kind of the larger structural things. I know that there's a lot happening with the park right now, and the video is not comprehensive of every aspect and every issue. What it reflects is what happened at the park when I was there and who I spoke to and the things that they told me. So though it doesn't reflect everything that happens at Camp KT, I hope that it does provide a sense of how it feels at the park, what the community feels like, some of the issues that are on people's minds down there. And ultimately, I hope that it helps further the conversation that we need to be having right now. So I hope you get something out of it. And I'm just very grateful that you're taking the time to join us tonight. So thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Hey folks, so welcome back. We really hope that you enjoyed the film, and we're gonna make the link public after this screening, so please share with friends and neighbors. And yeah, let's jump right into the Q&A. So on our Q&A panel tonight, we have Veronica, camp leader and firekeeper. Veronica, as she had explained, has been a caretaker in the downtown east side for decades. She helped to develop the Cottonwood Garden in Strathcona Park and has been an active member of CRAB and the Water for Life Society since 1982. Next, we have Nicole Luongo, camp liaison. Nicole has an academic background in sociology where she researches the intersections of poverty, drug use, and trauma. She currently mediates communication between KT residents and the Strathcona Residents Association. Her lived experience of homelessness and illicit drug use in the downtown east side informs and motivates her work with Camp KT. Next, we have Fiona York. Fiona York is the main camp organizer, and in her regular work, she's the coordinator of the Carnegie Community Action Project. She has worked with 10 cities in Oppenheimer and Crab Parks. She has worked in the downtown east side for 10 years as a community organizer and sits on the boards of the Dugout and the Vancouver Lower Mainland Multicultural Support Services Society. Next, so that's everyone who's here with us. And then out in Zoom land, we have City Councillor Jean Swanson joining for the Q&A. Jean Swanson is an anti-poverty activist whose interests include affordable housing, harm reduction, and decriminalization of drug use. Harm reduction and decriminalization of drug use and poverty reduction. Jean is a 2017 Order of Canada recipient. And lastly, we have Parks Board Commissioner John Irwin with us. And John is an SFU lecturer in geography, a cycling advocate, and a sustainability activist. So for this Q&A, we are prioritizing questions from Strathcona residents. So we hope that folks who are tuning in from abroad, past the neighborhood, can be patient, and we're really trying to facilitate a conversation here in the neighborhood. And please remember that this is just one step in a larger bridge being built between two communities. Due to the complexity of these issues, panelists will not be able to satisfy all of your questions in this one session. So we'll take questions by a raise hand in the chat, or if you want to write a question, we'll field some from the chat as well. Raise hand in your video. We'll actually be looking for raised hands, or I don't know if anyone knows how to do the click a hand icon. And yeah. And so in keeping in the intention with this event, please be respectful and constructive with your questions and limit yourself to a minute. And if your questions are for Jean or John specifically, please direct it to them so we can unmute them and get them to respond to you. So yeah, I thought I'd start with a quick one. Does anyone here want to talk about how the film depicts camp life? Maybe Veronica, how accurately does Ryan's work depict camp life for you?
Oh, yes. It seems as though it's a little bit earlier on than in the community of the year, earlier on in the year. Now there seems to be quite a few more tents I really like having to looking in and seeing all the residents, and many of them who are still a part of the tent community and still actively participating in tent life and in the tent community life. And yeah, that to me it is very accurate. Every day, some come along to do things like do a bit of cooking porridge for us in the morning, and later on others come out to get garbage pails and go around the community, and a lot of us just kind of hang out and have chats and talks. I've seen a lot of sobriety happen over there, and water access to water being so crucial. I've seen a lot of community members accessing the water, and how both hydrate and using the little field house facility to the extent where that that connection has allowed people to take better care of themselves. So showing up in a little film like this one makes it a whole lot more comfortable for the community in tents, unlike what was happening both at Crab parking lot and also what was happening there at Oppenheimer Park. So I can really appreciate the clean and the green and the look of everyone just seems a lot friendlier and more open, and yeah, just willing to participate, given that there's just a wee bit more space in the Strathcona community tenting.
So someone wanted to know how Strathcona housed neighbors, how they could get more involved in the camp, and if so, what kinds of involvement and connection and support or activities do you think would be helpful?
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that question. And we actually have quite a few people already in the Strathcona House community who are helping with the camp on a day-to-day level. So we were talked about the gardeners and how helpful they have been in offering food and produce from the garden. There's one gentleman who lives in the community here who comes every single day with 2 big buckets of filtered water that he brings to the camp. So there's quite a few people. Max himself here lives in the community, so there's quite a number of people who live in the community that are involved in the camp. We have a large community of volunteers. There's about 171 volunteers. So if people are looking to get involved, I've provided my contact information to the Strathcona Residents Association and Community Policing as well. If people want to access my information, I can probably put it in the chat here as well. We usually talk to people about what they're interested in doing. We've got a large online chat group, and then there's teams where people can talk about if they're interested in helping in the kitchen or helping with supplies and donations, cleanup, firekeeping, different aspects of the camp, so people can get involved in the area that they're interested in, and we can have a conversation. They can contact me. They can come down to the fire. We always ask that people come to the Sacred Fire and do protocol before continuing on to offer their services or provide a donation or whatever it is that they're coming to the camp for. But we'd be more than happy to have people come to the camp and help out.
Okay, folks, does anyone want to raise their hand? Anyone have a question?
Just a real quick one. someone has come along and brought this mesh tent, and we can't seem to figure out how it goes together. Beautiful mesh tent, and I would like for it to be put up in around our kitchen area to keep the crows and the seagulls off the tables where prepared foods are brought in. And it's a difficult situation to feed them and feed us. And it would not, I would really like if I could get someone who has some woodworking skills. I have a little bit of donated monies to be able to buy things such as 2x2 pieces of wood to perhaps stand in the way of the metal poles that don't seem to really fit together to put that mesh tent together to keep all those crows and seagulls that are really enjoying all of the donated meals that we get. So yeah, if someone had some woodworking skills that could come along and help us put up that mesh tent, that would be really helpful.
So we have a question from the chat here where someone's wondering about the modular housing that has been proposed for Clark and Vernon. Does anyone want to speak on that?
Oh, Jean can answer. Yeah, sure.
Jean, we're just going to put you up for that. I see your hand went up there. So just give us 1 second, folks. We're just going to put Jean Swanson on the call here.
Can you hear me now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, we can, Jean.
Yeah, so the province and the city announced a bunch of modular housing yesterday, 98 units for the Vernon Drive site. That's going to be temporary, which means a maximum of 10 years before it will have to be torn down and moved. And it won't be ready until spring, so it's not going to help anybody over the winter. I guess it's good to have it. I don't know if Strathcona residents would be prioritized for that. I haven't heard anything about that. It might just be people off the BC housing list. I don't know what particularly the questioner wanted answered about it. In my opinion, I'm glad there's 350 other modular units that were announced that would be permanent modular, which is good. But the problem is I don't think they'll be done for 2 or 3 years, which is way too slow. And the other problem is that these are just being put forward by the city and the province. The feds are completely missing in action. So if there's anybody out there that wants to try pressuring some Liberal MPs, we desperately need them to come forward with some money. Trudeau was on the radio this morning saying that I forget what the exact quote was, but it was something to the effect that they had a great homelessness plan, and I certainly haven't seen it. They really need some pressure to put some money into housing for people who are homeless.
Thanks, Jean. So there's a question in the chat about the Pete Fry incident and how that could have been handled better. So I can actually speak on this because I just had a very coincidental experience where I actually bumped into the man who was involved with the Pete Fry incident just a few days ago. He was just hanging out on the bridge, the Militant Mothers Bridge, and I was walking by. And so I said, "Hey, you're that guy from the Pete Fry video." And he was kind of like, "Oh yeah, I guess so." Like he didn't even really see, he was kind of spaced out and wasn't really even clear that it was a thing. Definitely had some mental health issues and was very clearly, just basic clarity issues were evident. And so, yeah, I'm talking to him, I'm trying to kind of assess what happened there, what's going on. And I think one thing that was just very clear is like, I've never met Pete Fry, and I only saw the excerpt that was in the YouTube video that went viral, but it's evident that this guy was just hanging out, and I appreciate that they didn't want him on whoever's property he was on, but he was not an aggressive man. I talked to him for a half an hour. I asked him if he wanted to, take his story to the media or make a video or something. He wasn't interested in that. But I mean, just from an obvious level, a guy like Pete Fry, who's a city councillor, and his job is to have, decorum and to be able to contain himself and deal with these situations. I just found it very surprising. Like I said, I've never met Pete, but it just was kind of a shock of how he handled it, having his chest up and everything. Like, it was like, why is this even escalated to that level? This guy didn't threaten me in any way in the slightest. He didn't have any of that vibe. And I'm not just saying that. I really mean that. So I don't know. Does anyone else want to speak on that one?
So yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to contribute. I just want to kind of reiterate what I've been saying in the discussion forum on Facebook. And I know this is difficult for some folks to hear, but the ideal kind of approach in this situation is really to try and view drug use as a neutral activity. There's enormous amount of stigma around illicit substance use, and obviously I'm not going to sit here and get into the entire history of, drug prohibition and why it emerged. But we're at a particular moment in history. 100 years ago, drugs were viewed differently. 100 years from now, they likely will also be viewed differently. So I think trying to contextualize that is really important. And we've been, kind of trained, if you will, to view drug use, and particularly public drug use among people who are very visibly street entrenched, as this immediately nefarious, horrible thing. And I will just say that for many people who have been, socioeconomically marginalized, who are living in extreme poverty, who have contended with severe trauma, drugs are medicine. I can speak from personal experience. I won't start citing studies. I'll speak from my own lived experience. If it weren't for crack cocaine, I would be dead. If it weren't for opioids, I would be dead. I would have killed myself many years ago. And so in the broader picture, yes, you might walk out of your front door and see someone using drugs, and it might bother you because it's a stigmatized behavior. But in those instances, aggressively pointing out, or even just pointing out at all, that someone is kind of being deviant or undermining social norms, that's not going to do anything other than lead to hostility and aggression, because folks are severely traumatized. There's been a lot of kind of neurophysiological adaptations that have happened through that, where hypervigilance is, again, necessary when you're on the street. And so you may think that you are not being antagonistic, but even glaring at someone and particularly remarking negatively on their drug use, it's not going to have a desirable outcome for any parties involved. The person's not going to stop using drugs. They're probably not going to go, oh, thank you. It hadn't occurred to me to not use drugs. So if we can kind of collectively work on not seeing drug use as this horrific thing that, small children shouldn't be exposed to. I mean, you're a few blocks away from the downtown east side. There are drugs everywhere. And I would just suggest it would be a good maybe way to seg into a bit of a lesson on the fact that some people use drugs. And they always have, and they always will. That's kind of what I got on that.
Thanks, Nicole. So as a segue, someone who is obviously sensitive to this matter is basically saying we appreciate what Nicole is saying about this, but we do want to still address our concern for drug use that's happening on our doorstep, needles being left around, needles in playgrounds. So do either Fiona or Veronica, do you want to speak to the camp's procedure and plans around dealing with needles?
Okay. So again, thank you for raising the question, and we understand that there's a concern, and it's a concern that we share, and we have taken measures to try to address that as well. We've been having weekly meetings with the Strathcona Residents Association, and one of the things we talked about is just making the drop boxes more accessible. So providing means and to facilitate the cleanup. So we've also had people within the camp, residents within the camp, and I think you saw that in the film that we watched earlier. So residents who take the initiative and are part of a cleanup crew that goes around and helps to pick up needles within the camp and also outside the camp. I do think that there's a need as well to have a joint cleanup crew rather than just residents to go around the neighborhood. One of the things that we pointed out is that when people are seeing some of the needles or the drug use or outside of the camp, it may not actually be connected to the camp. We are near the downtown east side. I'm sure some of these behaviors have predated the camp and probably are happening with people who are not connected to the camp. So it probably should be a joint community effort with residents and people outside the camp. But we've had those conversations about facilitating that, making it more accessible, making it more possible, having the tools to do that, and having residents and others involved in that.
So there is a plan of getting more sharps containers now?
Yeah, we actually did request from the city. There's some large metal containers that are easier to mount. They're in some locations in the downtown east side. In some of the alleys, there's some large metal containers. And so we've been requesting getting some of those in areas that people are finding needles as well, just to make that a little bit easier and facilitate that. We do have a lot of the appropriate equipment on site, but it's a little bit harder to get those containers and get the tongs for picking them up and just sort of making that easier and facilitating that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that as a result of this pandemic that's going on, the COVID-19, there's many of the community groups and organizations that have sponsored outreach teams to come out and sweep up, clean up, and pick up drug paraphernalia. They're not functioning. And so the end result is that there's the appearance of that there are more may truly not be may not be so. It may be just that one sees them today when a few months ago, before this pandemic, the COVID virus came along, there were community groups and teams of people that were out picking up and sweeping up all of the evidence of drug use in and around all of the neighborhoods, not just the downtown east side and not just Strathcona. And to repeat what Fiona mentioned, that it's not necessarily a direct result of a bunch of tents in Strathcona that's created the mess. So yeah, I just say let's get together and let's clean it up.
Thanks, Veronica. Yeah. Jean, would you like to speak on this one?
Sorry. I was really impressed with what Nicole said. I've heard other people say, too, that they would have killed themselves if they weren't able to do drugs. And I think it's really important for everyone to understand that that's a reality out there. And yeah, if you see somebody, if you're walking down the street with your kid and you see somebody doing drugs, that's an opportunity to explain some compassionate stuff to the kid and maybe try and, do something nice for the person. The other thing I wanted to say is that Patty Daly made a presentation to City Hall months and months ago But one of the things she said was that hardly anyone, or maybe she said no one in Vancouver had ever gotten sick from touching a needle. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen about how dangerous needles really are. I'm not advocating that we all go out and start picking them up without tongs, but maybe just a little more realistic education about them.
Thank you, Jean. John, it does sound like a lot of the times that this conversation comes up, it does revolve around especially kids in parks, dogs in parks. Is there anything specifically around parks where this issue is being addressed, or is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, just that, operationally, we also might have had a little less pickers out because of I tried to argue that the city should have borrowed and kept some of our more temporary seasonal people, employed because the city had the capacity to borrow money. The province granted that, but that didn't happen. So we also have less people on the ground. But I think if residents can do a bit of it, that might be helpful. It's probably more of a concern for pets because pets tend to kind of, get down into the dirt and things like that. And they probably won't necessarily get like an illness. I think a lot of the needle concern, if I remember correctly, was around autoimmune deficiency, AIDS, more than the actual sharps themselves being such an issue. So I think if people can clean them up a bit, hopefully we can get some staff on. I did want to address a bathroom issue that I think, I've been asking for quite a few months about trying to get some kind of improved bathroom facilities down there. But I'm one of two voices towards the more progressive end on the park board. So there's other people who aren't, as keen for that. And I'll also ask about the septic failing because I've heard that before, although I don't think it affects the water quality, but I'll check into that too. So, I just want to say that I've been at all three camps throughout the whole period, meeting with people weekly and bi-weekly in Oppenheimer, and that clearly, I like the video and how Veronica calls for 10,000 units. We really need people to step up because I'm also worried about, today, my understanding is I don't think evictions are going to be held off any longer. So hopefully the landlords are wise enough to keep people in their units, but if they're not, we could have even more people in this situation. So thank you.
Thank you, John. So we see CM has their hand up. We're just going to unmute you, CM.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thanks.
Okay, sorry, my camera's broken. I first of all just wanted to say, maybe Nicole, as you're the camp liaison, first, thanks for being in that role. And second, thank you to the campers. Maybe that could be passed along for opening up this camera to come in and view their lives. I know we've seen on some of the Facebook groups that, how kind of overstudied, forgive me if I'm not using the right terminology, but kind of overstudied, over-census this area of our population is, and sort of open themselves up to having that camera to show some of us and hopefully more residents some of the reality there. I just want to make sure that on behalf of residents that there said thank you for that. I did want to ask about something, really just a little bit of perspective. There was a point in the film where it was talked about, kind of, it seemed like there was a camp there first. It was a woman in a Pawnee, Indiana shirt that was talking, and she said that the residents of Strathcona either said it was unacceptable or basically get the hell out. I'm just wondering if that situation could be broken out a little more. Was she meant that years ago there used to be another encampment there and it got moved on? Could we get a little bit more breakout or history on that part of the film or that story? Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a couple of friends come by the fire earlier today, and one of them talked about 15 or 17 years ago, there was a tent city there at Strathcona Park, and with a finger point showed me the area that they were camped in. And I'm not sure how many. I don't recall hearing or didn't take it in. Just the number of tents that were there, but so much so that yes, there was required to have some sort of security. And so my friend was younger and more vital, and was considered the Iron Lady at that time, and held the community together in that way. But also they looked after and fed each other and helped each other out in the same way that we're working toward doing in this tent city, though not having the sacred fire. It required that they were a lot more vigilant for each other's well-being there at that time, and that was about 15, 17 years ago. And then my knowledge of Strathcona, the area around there, there's always been a homeless population there, whether they were in tents, and I know that there were tents at the community garden, Cottonwood Garden, and at Strathcona Garden, and through Strathcona Park. And over all of the years, there's always been some element, as well as a lot of wheeled vehicles, and to me, these also are houseless, homeless peoples, those ones that are in recreational vehicles and whose cars are plastic coated on the inside or outside, and sleeping places are in their cars. And at nighttime, they put a little tent up in the front of their vehicle, and so that it's not as though this hasn't been a part of Strathcona community, Strathcona Garden Park, rather, for quite some time. And one of the things that I learned in attending the Parks Board meeting, the last one that I was at, there's 117 parks impacted by the homelessness and tents and homeless community. And there's 280 some parks in the city. So that's a significant number, to my mind anyway, of parks that are impacted by homelessness. The Strathcona Park has had homeless tents and peoples around it for a long, long time, and that there are two Bottle Depot communities, Bottle Depot businesses not too far off. Shirley is part of some of the population that wanders through both the park and the various gardens. And the rail yards have the rail rolling through that way. There's lots of open free space around there to put a mattress and a tent up. So it's not. And to me, it's not been over 40 years of being in Vancouver. Has it ever occurred to me that there's the tents and so on, they've always existed here. That includes Oppenheimer Park and Crab Park and Crab parking lot.
Thank you, Veronica. So yeah, please, if you want to ask questions, it looks like there's a way to leave that hand up, as we can see. So please feel free to leave a hand up. And I just want to say, folks, as a Strathcona resident and as someone who's heard a lot of the concerns of the neighborhood, like, please don't be shy. We know that there's a lot of concern about what's going on in Strathcona Park. It is two very different communities. So if anyone wants to keep asking these questions and continue to work towards some constructive stuff here, we really encourage you to chime in. We know it's not easy, but we encourage you to chime in. So Diane. Okay. So Diana had her hand up with us.
I'll go ahead and ask. Hi, everybody. It's Ryan. I had a question for the group. In watching the film, I guess I'm interested to know from your perspective, like, what's missing in terms of what you might want people to know that's happening down there. Is there something you think that the film doesn't capture that people should know about?
I would say we didn't in this film get a single skunk, a single squirrel, a single eagle, not a crow, not a seagull. And to me, and there's been raccoons too, a time or two. And to me, we understand, and I've impressed on all of the residents that come to the fire, put medicine in that fire, and that is truly, we are attempting to be the good neighbors of these creatures. It's been their homes long before we came along, and it has been said that there are generations of creatures in the park, coyotes included. I've seen coyotes in Strathcona Park and in Crab Park and up and down all the streets here in Vancouver. So to me, we need to be good neighbors to all of these creatures, because without them, I think that human beings might as well consider we too are going to follow the route of extinction. So we need to be mindful of those that were there ahead of us and before us.
Yeah, I just want to say I really enjoyed the film, and I think it added a lot of important nuance that is sometimes missing from discussions about KT. I just want to say I'm not there nearly as much as other folks, but I know from kind of being on the Facebook group and whatnot that there is a lot of tension around kind of the social disorder, if you will, that might be emerging from the camp or present at the camp. And I just want to say, like, when I have been there, there are definitely moments where, you hear screaming or fighting, and it's not always this, rosy picture of harmony, because how could it be with that many people who are, for the most part, pretty stressed out at times anyway. But I think what's really important about that is the approach that leadership takes to those instances. With street level homelessness, particularly on the downtown east side, every facet of people's lives has the potential to be criminalized. So something like yelling or screaming, if someone is on the downtown east side, often the police are on that pretty quickly. Whereas at camp, I've seen Chrissy say, it's two people, let them work it out. And every time I have encountered that, it has worked out. So what I want to emphasize is that when folks aren't constantly under surveillance, they are generally able to lead kind of more quote unquote stable, if you will, lives. Whereas if, I just want to kind of tie this into my concern about increased police presence, because had, police been around at these particular moments, they very well could have intervened and guaranteed that would have escalated. So I just think it's really important to understand that sometimes de-escalation looks like just leaving people alone. because most people in Strathcona, they get into fights. Sometimes they scream, but they have walls. So I just think that's a really important part of camp, to let people lead semi-autonomous lives. And more often than not, things do work out.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, that really resonates. Like me and Veronica were actually broke up a fight recently in the last few days, and I was thinking about that exactly, just about how, like, when the police come in, they don't know these people, but we can very quickly get into it because we know what's going on. You know, it did get to a physical fight, but we knew why, and so we could actually address it and talk to them and reason with them. And yeah, I think that I really appreciate that about Tennant City, is there's actually community there, and people who are trying to help there are really getting to know these people. So it isn't that the fear of the unknown with that. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on that last note that we are actually hosting a de-escalation workshop tomorrow night at this time at 6 p.m. in McLean Park. Everyone is welcome to attend. This was on the request of some neighbors who just wanted to be a little bit more informed about how to interact or how to engage with people. And so it is about that sort of stepping back and when to step back and when to engage, and how to engage with people and how to de-escalate situations. And so it kind of speaks to, we referred earlier to the Pete Fry incident and how not to behave, or how to stand back in some cases and let people resolve things. In terms of the film and what's missing, I think there's just so many hundreds of stories every day. It's really hard to capture everything. And I was thinking that in the film, it highlighted people that are missing, but then we can talk about people who are found as well. So we have stories in the last few days, even an aunt reunited with her niece, and a couple reunited. The partner came from Nova Scotia, flew in to pick up her partner who had been staying in the camp. And then we had a mother who came and did protocol at the fire and showed us a photo of her son, and we didn't recognize him, and she walked around and she had this sort of distinctive whistle, and she whistled, and then we heard her whistle, and then a few minutes later she came up like hand in hand with her son, and they just had the biggest smiles, like just beaming, and so they reunited. And so that all happened, I think, in one day. So there's all those stories as well. And then the sobriety, like Veronica was talking about. I talked to a gentleman the other day who said that he and his partner were staying at the camp because they had kids. Their kids were in foster care. It was the only place they could kind of be together. They were staying there, and also they wanted to be sober so they could have access to their kids. And in the time that he'd been at the camp, which was a fairly short amount of time, they actually had greatly, I think, totally eliminated their drug use, and were using just a small amount of alcohol. So it actually was working for them. It was effective. And so in those situations where people are not pressured and have access to being together, sort of like alternative access to ways that they can address their sobriety, then sometimes that can be very effective.
Can you repeat the details of the de-escalation workshop?
Yes, so it's tomorrow at 6 p.m. in McLean Park. It'll be outdoors. We don't have an exact meeting place, but it should be fairly easy to locate, and it'll be 6 p.m., probably about an hour and a half long.
I just want to quickly say that really makes me think about how something that I'm noticing in the tension between Strathcona and the camp is that these issues are happening. Like when you're talking about these missing people, one thing that I've noticed in my time is how many parents come through looking for their missing children. And it really makes me think these issues are happening regardless. And like they get focused on Strathcona Park, but that's only because, it's become a vessel to house some very troubling stuff. Yeah. So we have a question from Laura Kozak.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation, and incredible film. I think what I found sort of the most what was incredible to see in the film was just the sort of what you were just speaking to, this kind of community-based care that was really sort of emerging and being fostered and like being practiced in the camp, and recognizing that it's obviously not all like sunshine and roses, but there's this sort of incredible practice that's happening. And I wonder if maybe we could sort of speak to kind of like what we might envision as sort of like the future of these camps, and sort of recognizing like the ultimate goal is sort of being this like 10,000 housed, while also sort of recognizing like the incredible practice that's forming from these camps, and then sort of, I don't know, addressing like right now the strategies that are around housing are usually, you know, kind of like developments that include like sort of a fraction of sort of like low income housing or temporary housing, or if there is permanent housing, it's sort of far in the future. And I'm just sort of like wondering, or if we could speak to sort of like what strategies or visions kind of feel, I don't know, that we want to advocate for, sort of like short term, medium term, long term, if there's any sort of
Great question, Laura. Thank you. Yeah, great question.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that question. I think that you pointed out some really important things to note about developments, that so often when there are new developments, it is within the framework of a development that includes various types of housing, and so the social housing component might be a very small fraction of it. And I think that it's a policy both within BC Housing and City of Vancouver that very often they have made developments in such a way that it's they're financed by having the higher level housing within one building or within one development. Recently, actually here, very close to here around Raymer, there were two buildings that the city gave permits to, and in one of them it was the higher income housing, and the other one it contained some social housing. And so the developer was given the permit because one of the buildings included some social housing, but in fact overall the community is receiving more higher income housing that is not as needed. And so it's sort of kind of diluting this need that we have for the social housing and the more accessible lower income housing, and not necessarily supportive housing, but social housing that actually is at shelter rate. So there just needs to be more of a push for that. As Jean pointed out, there's so little coming from the federal government. So really targeting the federal government. Their homelessness strategy has been really, really lacking. They just talk about housing 50% of the homeless population within 10 years. And so obviously there's very, very little kind of urgency that's being seen there. So I think the thing that would be helpful is for people to help with the advocacy and the push around that, the housing, and that it's truly shelter rate, accessible, affordable social housing, as opposed to necessarily supportive housing or social housing projects that only contain a very small portion of social housing. And sometimes that's just in the language as well, that social housing can be identified as such when it only contains a very small portion, or maybe like a handful of suites that are actually at shelter rate. So I think it doesn't really answer your question in terms of immediate and medium term and long term, but all of those things, all of those factors, I think need to be taken into consideration, because it's just so slow any other way without a real push and a real sense of urgency to get those 10,000 units built and then continue from there. I think also in there I should mention SROs, the strategy to I think there's an SRO revitalization strategy, but there needs to be focus as well on maintaining and repairing SROs and not letting them gentrify, so that they're becoming kind of like out of the stock of affordable housing.
Sorry, just to add to that, it's my understanding as part of the KT demands or requests, if you will, are while folks are still at Strathcona Park to equip it with facilities in the shortest term, right? I think it's frankly absurd that we are trying, we're needing to have a GoFundMe to try and raise 25 grand so people can shower. That is a municipal responsibility. And then I don't want to sound like a broken record. I already kind of feel like one. But when it comes to supported versus social housing, of course, there are significant distinctions there that I have outlined several times on Facebook, if you want to check that. So I won't echo it again. But really, when we see these announcements and whatnot for new housing, have a discerning eye, be critical. Don't just go, oh, housing, because if it is supported housing, yes, some folks may need or want that, but by and large, the request is for social housing, which is not premised on that kind of hierarchical surveillance-based model that for many people feels unlivable.
I just want to keep putting it out that there are a number of hotels that are closed in the city, in the downtown east side specifically, and that is the Balmoral Hotel, the Regent Hotel, the Ivanhoe, the Backpackers, and the Dunsmuir House. And I think there's something close to 800 units of SRO hotel room type of spaces. And then as well, it occurred to me that 58 West Hastings was as well a tent city at some point, and there was some idea that there was going to be 100% social housing, and then it went to smaller numbers, smaller numbers, smaller numbers, and then they left it at 20%, and so no housing is happening at 58 West Hastings at present. Want to make mention too about the Pantages, which also was going to be some enormous social housing measure, but turns out to be very little social housing, in fact. And I do think that it's some sort of condo units that are happening there. Yeah, doesn't seem to be much foresight by everyone in the community and holding any of these promises together when it does actually come to housing people, perhaps like that were at Oppenheimer Park, that were at Crab parking lot, and are now at Strathcona Park. And whereas all this housing that so many have gone to tent cities for and have talked to their bureaucrats about, yeah, I hear you all, and I'm aware that Strathcona Park has the last count that I had from the parks rangers is we're ranging close to probably 400 plus homeless dwellings, tents and alternative to actually housing units for people, and that's quite significant, and to my mind, and it's a lot of work for a lot of us who are there. As Fiona mentioned, there's 171 volunteers that come through, and organizations. I have to admit that there's now beginning a huge influx of organizations coming in to assist and want in their own way. But you do have to understand that this is a tent city that is working, and the way that it is working is that it is an Indian Genius matriarchal led community, and everyone who is there, all of those 400 individual tents plus have come to an agreement that this is acceptable to them. So anyone who wants to come in and volunteer and or organize to help with those who are in tents needs to come understanding that we have a process and a system that is working, and we are a success, and we are going to stay succeeding. And come and join us, help us out, and follow through. And once the 10,000 are housed, yeah, I'll go home to my little place, and I'll go to bed quietly and calmly and feel really, really quite reassured that we have all done the work that we need to do to look after each other's, that we are all good people and we all have a right to a good place to live. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Veronica. Yeah, I just quickly want to say, as a Strathcona resident in our role, I know we get like, what does the camp want? What's the demands? What's next? But it's not. This isn't Occupy Wall Street. Like they're just putting out fires constantly all day. Like Veronica is out there. These are people who need homes, and no one has any one answer. We need to come together right now and figure out what's next. Like, this is not a simple thing that has one answer. It's not like Veronica has one specific demand where she's like, I want this and then we'll leave. It's like they're running this camp because there's hundreds of people there who need a house. If there's an answer, then we'll go from there, right? Like so we all have our different roles to play. So John, it sounds like John. Okay. So John, Commissioner John has to leave, so he wants to jump in here. And then Jean is next.
Great. Thanks, you guys, and thanks for the film. I thought it was great to see people up close, because we don't always, even with visits, we don't always get to see a range of folks, and I think that's really important. I think if we look ahead, people need to know that on the 14th of September, the sheltering in place bylaw will be official. It's just an automatic thing. Like, once we meet, that bylaw will be enacted, and that'll mean that our situation is like Victoria's. And I was just in Victoria. I didn't go up and see them up close and personal, because I have no relation with anyone there to speak of, but I saw lots of them around the city. So that's what's going to happen. A lot of places are going to camp out in different places with a lot of crazy rules around them, as you all know, and you know that I was on most of your side fighting against that, but that's what's happening. I think to erase the confusion, we should just push for public housing, publicly owned, publicly run housing with wraparound services that aren't onerous for people. So we don't want to set up a reinstitutionalized situation, but we want to like get people into homes, because we're kind of in the gravy part of the year. We know that in about 3-4 months we'll be into the rain and the perpetual rain and the cold, and that will be even more difficult. Look at the struggle we had over just trying to get a warming center into Oppenheimer, and no one seemed to be able to get that together until unofficially one happened, and Chrissy took me in there, and I was able to see people actually able to get some rest, because when it's cold, I think it's harder to get rested too, right? But anyway, I really wanted to thank folks for helping, setting this up and having this discourse. I saw, what are the implications? I don't want to overtake things, but I'll just quickly explain. It means that in most parks, there's going to be a section where people can take up tents. Of course, the issue that most people who are in the actual meeting know is that people have to take their tents down between 7 and 8 in the morning, which is pretty onerous. The irony is you can actually take your tent down and just sit next to it. No one can say, thankfully, that you have to leave the park, right? But it'll mean that people can at least officially camp out a little bit more, and I think they actually have been as well. So that's the direct implication. It's going to be complicated, and it'll probably be complaint driven, right? For people, who complain to us, and then the rangers will go out and tell people they need to move on. yeah, so it's a complicated issue, and we have to. It is and it isn't. I think if we just stepped up like we did in the '60s and '70s, and we built a lot of housing. Now, the other interesting thing is the development pump is running a little dry, so it could be that we have builders and developers who are once again interested in building public social housing, because that's what happens in the next, when there's a downturn, right? They actually start to go, hey, I'd like to stay in business. I'd like to keep building. So there's a prospect that could happen. Thanks to you guys. And thanks for so much for all your work out in the community. I'm just, it makes me proud to be, a Vancouverite when I see everyone stepping in to help out so much on so many levels.
Thank you very much, John. So it looks like we just have, after Jean, we just have Marion in the queue. If anyone else wants to raise their hand now, we're winding down. We could take maybe a few questions after Marion. Yeah, Jean.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on some of the things that Fiona was saying about the definition of social housing and how it's screwing low-income people in the downtown east side. So the definition of social housing in the city is that housing that's owned by the government or a nonprofit, where 30% of it is at HILLS. HILLS stands for Housing Income Limits. And it's a BC housing term. It means if you pay 30% of your rent, and it has to be for a one bedroom, your income has to be under $51,000, and for a 3-bedroom, I think it has to be under 80-some thousand. So actually, with 30% at HILLS, nothing is guaranteed for anyone on welfare or disability, or for anyone who's homeless, because they're too poor. And in the downtown east side, 30% has to be at welfare rate, so it's a little bit better. So what's happening on October 6th is there's 2 reports that are coming to council. One is about SROs, and one is about the 3-year review of the downtown east side local area plan. And it's the downtown east side local area plan that's one of the culprits in keeping the affordability of housing, in pushing for that social mix model, which is meaning that low-income people can't afford to stay in their neighborhood because there's not enough low-income units being built. So if anybody wants to keep their eye out for that report and come up and speak on it, I think it would be really important. And then for the SRO report, I know the SRO Collaborative is working really hard to try and get rent control on the unit, not the tenant, in SROs. The city has actually unanimously voted to ask the province for that, and the province said no. And so now we're going to try and get the city to do it. And the reason that that's important is because every time an SRO building is sold, it's usually, it's almost always sold to an owner whose business model is to get rid of the current low-income paying tenants and then double or triple the rent. So we lose all of those units. So if it takes 2 to 3 years to build those 350 new permanent modular, if we don't have vacancy control in the SROs, we will have lost 350 SRO units by then. So it's really important to try and put some pressure on the city to try and be brave about doing that itself, trying to keep landlords from raising rents when tenants leave. There's some thought that it could be done by using business licenses. So maybe John and I can work on trying to get a shower down there. And the other thing I was just wanting to ask you guys a question is, what do you think about the winter? What is going to happen in the winter? It will get cold and it will get yucky probably. Is there a way of, I don't know. Just makes me so mad they don't open up the hotels, more hotels.
Thanks, Jean. There's been already some talk with others that we're going to start opening up these heat shelters like those big dome tents. And the idea is it's not like OPS, putting up like what happened at Oppenheimer Park. The minute one went up and it was large enough that somebody in there with a whole pile of drugs moved in. It's going to be open-ended, and it's going to be just that, a way of getting out of the snow and out of the rain and the dampness, and we'll have to be looking at it seriously. For me, what I recall in being around Oppenheimer Park during that snow there last year is I walked through Oppenheimer Park anytime it started snowing, and just walked by tents, encouraging people to come out of their tents and knock the snow off the top of their tent. And we'll be doing that this winter for sure if there's snow. And even in the rain and the dampness, what I do is all of the tents around me as I go around, and if the tents are already reaching to the ground, I knock the water out. I take the tarps up and remove the water out of the accumulated little spots that the water sits, and am constantly asking the firekeepers to go into areas to push the water out that's accumulated in the canopies and the tarps that are hanging around in the community. So we have a strategy, as simple as it may be, but I know that having grown up as a young person, that we had to look after. Everyone had a job, and it didn't matter if it was summer or winter. Everyone had a job to do, and some of that includes knocking snow off, getting rid of the water, pushing the water out of little accumulated spots. So I think that's some of the things we'll do, as well as putting up those huge structures that when tents do collapse, that people are able to find shelter in these big structures. And we have lots of blankets, and we're always calling for more blankets and more tarps to help out the community. And we have a laundry team that is operating at times 3 times a week. If there's been a rain already, the laundry team does an extra day of laundry just to afford people dry blankets, sleeping bags, and socks, and so on. So yeah, we're working away at it, Jean. Thanks for the question.
Okay, so our last question of the night is Marion.
It's my question. I found this very helpful, but my question is not so much a question, but a comment. I'm concerned. I found this really, really helpful, and I learned a lot. But I'm concerned that one person is characterizing all Strathcona homeowners, with the same viewpoint, and I think that's a really an inaccurate view, and I think it's not a view that allows us to be able to move forward. And so I would ask people to understand, just from my very random discussions in the neighborhood, that it's very split and very nuanced. So you can't, I can't speak, if I speak as a Strathcona resident, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I hear as many residents as many views. So to characterize it one way or another, I think is problematic, and I would just ask that not happen again. That's my entire comments.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about me, Marion, because I did see you mention it in the comments. Yeah, I'm sorry if it came across that way. I definitely agree that it's not that case, and that that's very nuanced. I've had a lot of conversations with neighbors who are very angry, and I was hoping that this could be an opportunity to have some of them express that. But I definitely agree that it's not that simple. So thank you.
maybe if I could just ask, just to wrap up then, because we'll have one last question for folks, just for the group, I guess, just on that note, is if there's just any kind of parting message to the Strathcona community just to pass on in terms of what you want to convey or help that you need, just kind of one last opportunity to do that. So maybe we'll just go around quickly and just a chance for folks to sign off.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. I just want to say, as Strathcona residents, I'm really excited to keep doing what we're doing with this. So, yeah, we're out here and we're trying to see how we can help. Yeah, thank you, folks.
I would like to say a simple idea that I've come up with, and this comes from my teacher. The teacher is one that I hold to tell me always the truth, and that I have 1,000 ancestors that walk with me wherever I go and how I am in my life. The saying that the teacher has is that every human being has a right to feel good about themselves. And I walk with that one and share that at any time that I'm able.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything particularly insightful at this moment. Just kind of a general thanks for tuning in, and just a reminder for all of us really that we can't know something that we don't know, I guess. And the perception might be that we're characterizing the SRA in a certain way and the SRA is characterizing us in a certain way, or some folks. And yeah, we all have nuanced, complex lives. And ultimately, I know we're all doing the best we can with multiple kind of intersecting difficult situations. So yeah, just wanting to kind of proceed with that kind of collective awareness. So yeah, thank you.
I would just say thank you for the last comment, and certainly we realize that there's a lot of different perspectives, and we do remain really grateful to those who've been really supportive of the camp and participated or brought donations or supported in so many different ways. And at the same time, there's so much nuance within the camp and so much diversity as well, and just so many things and people and different things happening. And I feel really grateful often to be there and learn from the people that are there and from Veronica and from others, and sort of like have the opportunity to meet and to interact with people that are staying at the camp and learn from them. So again, I guess just the diversity of opinions and where people are coming from, grateful both to people in the community and people at the camp.
Jean, would you like to say a parting message?
Just thanks so much for everybody that's working so hard to keep the camp clean and safe and make sure everybody is taken care of. I really appreciate it. I wish governments could do that work, but the community seems to be doing it, so I'm really grateful. And if you need anything, ask me and I'll try and get it.
Okay, thank you so much, folks. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to actually connect in this way. Yeah, have a great night, folks.